Welcome and thanks for being here. Today we're going to focus on probably the most important skill that we'll be learning throughout these next sessions. We're going to be learning something called intentional dialogue. And let me tell a little story about how I came to this intentional dialogue. I'd always been interested in couples and relationships and how we connect and communicate, or for that matter, don't connect and communicate. And I wanted to know, what does it mean to be fully present in relationship? Or as the new, what we've been talking a lot about lately in our society is how to be mindful in relationship. So I was at a retreat in a place called Tassajara up in Big Sur, a beautiful place. It's a Buddhist monastery. And I asked the head monk at one of the workshops, how do you be fully present in relationship? So he brought me over in front of the group and he looked at me and he looked at me in the eyes and we both got very quiet. And we were just sitting with each other in that silence, looking at each other. So what he was pointing out to me was pretty profound at the time for me, and that was just to be present, was to just be there with each other without having to say much, just sitting. But that really didn't do it for me, because I wanted to know, what does it mean to be present when you're communicating, when you're talking? Because what typically happens when we're talking with each other is our mind starts to wander. We're already forming opinions and judgments as the person is speaking to us, as our partner is talking to us. We're thinking about how we're going to respond, how we're going to reply. Now, how can I be fully present in relationship without forming opinions, judgments? We're distracted by our environment. We're distracted because we're thirsty. We're distracted because we're hungry. Something our partner says distracts us, and we want to just point that out to them, how what they said may not be correct. But how do we fully be present, be there? So that was my journey. And it wasn't until I came across a gentleman by the name of Harville Hendricks and his wife Helen, and they taught me this skill called intentional dialogue, which is what we're going to learn today. It's a way of being in this situation with your partner where you're fully listening without forming judgments, without forming opinions. And that's part of what we're going to learn today. So I want to talk about the first part of the intentional dialogue. First of all, we might want to point out that listening is a skill that we need to learn. We're not necessarily born with great listening. There may be some who are, but most of us aren't. It's something we really need to practice. And the first part of the intentional dialogue really gives us an opportunity to begin to learn how to be truly great listeners for our partner. And after all, this is really what most of us want. We want to be heard. And so the first part I'm going to teach you is called mirroring. The mirroring is the part of the intentional dialogue where we simply reflect back to our partner what it is we heard them say. Now, why would we do mirroring, you might ask? Well, you would be very surprised at how often we misinterpret what our partner is saying, or we think we heard what they said, but again, because we're thinking, we're trying to react, we're forming opinions, we're not really so present, so we may miss something very important, or we may misinterpret. So mirroring is a way to be in a situation where you're just reflecting back what you heard your partner say and then checking that out. So we're going to be practicing that with a special couple who agreed to work with us today, and they will be practicing the mirroring. Essentially, though, the skill set for the mirroring is that you start out by asking your partner if you can have an intentional dialogue. Now, why would you ask your partner for a conversation, you might ask? It's a very good question. It seems kind of unnatural to say to your partner, honey, can we have a conversation now? Is now a good time? Well, it does a few things. First of all, it respects the boundaries of your partner, that maybe now is not a good time to have that conversation. Secondly, it allows your partner permission, it gives your partner permission to say no, that this isn't a good time. But the rule of thumb is Within 24 hours, you will be available to have that conversation. And, you know, your partner may be distracted. They may have lots of things going on. So we just want to check in and ask, I'd like to have a conversation. Is now a good time? And assuming they say yes, we move on to the next stage. So now your partner begins to share with you what it is they want to say. And once they're done with that, you will mirror back and say exactly what you heard them say. Following the mirroring, you're going to ask 3 magic words, which rarely get asked in our conversations. But I'll tell you, these 3 words are up there with I love you and I'm sorry. And those 3 words are, is there more? Is there more? Why are those words so powerful? Because it tells your partner you're interested. You want to hear what they have to say. You're not trying to bring it back to yourself so quickly. So, your partner finishes, you mirror, and you say, is there more about that? They go on. You mirror again. Again, is there more? And on it goes until finally your partner says, no, that's about it. And then you give a summary mirror. Now, what is a summary mirror? A summary mirror is simply summarizing what you just heard your partner say. So in summary, what I heard you say is, and you just hit the key points. Just that alone, and that's only the first part of the intentional dialogue, but just that alone will create such a deep connection with you and your partner, probably one that you haven't had before. Now, obviously, this communication technique of mirroring is not used for just typical normal conversation, although it can be practiced with normal conversation. In some ways, it makes it much easier if you practice it with normal everyday conversation, like how was your day, and you practice the mirroring so that when there is frustration and conflict and you're trying to have a dialogue, you've got the skills, you're feeling comfortable with them. So you can use it for everyday dialogue, but I wouldn't necessarily use it in that way all the time. This is a great skill set to use when there is conflict, when there's a disagreement, and your partner really needs to be heard, and you need to really be heard. So the mirroring is the first stage. Also, of course, I didn't say that then it's your turn. Once your partner finishes and you summarize, then you will get a chance to speak as well. But before you do that, there's a second step. Once your partner's been mirrored and once you've summarized, you are then going to validate your partner. Now, what is validation? Validation is a very critical component of the intentional dialogue and of maintaining safety and connection with your partner. Validation is simply letting your partner know that you understand their perspective. You understand where they're coming from. You've listened carefully and you understand their perspective. Doesn't mean you agree with it. It just means you heard them and what they said makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you completely, but you can understand that from their perspective, it probably makes sense. So you just validate. You let your partner know, okay, I understand this is the way you think. It may not be the way I think about the situation, but it's the way you think. And I can respect that. Why can you respect that? Because that is how they think and feel. You know, we like to think that our partner is going to think and feel exactly as we do. And oftentimes that's what we're trying to get them to do is, hey, you don't think like I think? And then we get into trouble. So validating your partner's perspective is the next stage. So what you would simply say is, I've listened carefully, your perspective is important to me, and you make sense. Then we're going to move on to the next part of the dialogue, which is really critical as well. All of these steps are critical, but that's empathy. if the validation is listening with your mind, the empathy is listening with your heart. It's actually heartfulness as opposed to mindfulness. So now when you're listening with your heart, what you're doing is you're understanding how your partner is feeling. You're connecting with their feelings. So you've done the mirroring, you've validated them, and now you're going to connect to their feelings. Why would we want to connect with their feelings? Empathy is the key to deep connection with your partner. Everybody wants to be heard, and we want to know you know how we feel. So you may not know how your partner feels, so you guess. I imagine you might be feeling fill in the blank. I imagine you might be feeling confused. I imagine you might be feeling frustrated. I imagine you might be feeling angry. Is that how you're feeling? And your partner simply responds yes or no. And if you didn't get it right, your guess, then how are you feeling? What am I missing? And she'll share that with you, or he'll share that with you. This is a beautiful way of talking about anything that you're going through in your relationship and maintain safety and connection, which are key elements of a good, solid relationship. We all want to feel safe. Typically, when there's conflict, we move right into that fight or flight response. And what the dialogue helps us do is stay out of that fight and flight response because we're feeling safe. Thank you for joining us. If you've gained any knowledge or insight from this video, I encourage you to continue to the next video in order to build upon your relationship toolkit. The relationship vision is an incredible opportunity to create the relationship of your dreams. If you can imagine it, you can be it. And in the relationship vision video, you're going to learn how to take two of your separate visions and merge them into one, so that from here on in, you are building your life, your relationship life together instead of letting it just show up.